Hi, so in this video what we're going to be looking at is tile sets and rooming essentially. Tile sets are used in order to make your room, so basically adding terrain or walls or background elements, just things that exist within your level or within menus or anything like that. A tile set is just a set of sprites that you can use just to sort of decorate your level or your menu or anything like that. Um, to do this, you need to make a new sprite in order to make a tile set. Now, what I would suggest is if you've not already watched my video previously, look at the sprites video because that will help contextualize what we're about to do. So, to make your tile set, go on to Create and go on to Sprite on the Sprites folder. And using the same naming conventions as before, I'm going to call it SBR background. That's absolutely fine. That's not a problem. Now, what I have done, I have actually gotten a tile set that I have gotten from Kenny.com, a really useful website for getting sprites that are free of charge. All you can make your own, it's entirely up to you. But I'm going to use that one anyway. So here's one that I got from before. And we're going to use the packed one. So the packed one is ones without any spacing between them. And that's ideally what you want, to be honest. The no space in between them will mean that we can change these sprites quite easily, hopefully. So after this, so once we're happy with the sprite and we think, yeah, that looks fine, you don't animate it. So in the previous video, I showed you how to do animations with sprites. These are not going to be animated because they are tiles. Technically, you can animate them, but we do that in a separate place. So what you need to do now is right-click on tile sets. I'm going to create a tile set. And within this tile set, we need to choose a sprite. Now, obviously, the sprite we're going to choose is the one that we've just made, which is the SPR background. And what I'm now going to do is zoom in so you guys can see what's going on. And what we can see is these squares nearly line up with all of the sprites that are in here. But if you notice, they are not big enough. So we need to change that. We need to do something about it. So on the right-hand side here are all the settings for it. Now, I believe these are all 18 by 18 squares, which if we put that in and have a look, yeah, that looks like it's covered all of them, which is perfect. So each one should be in its own individual square, which it is. Now, what you can do as well, so there are offsets. So if we put, say, 2 on the X offset, it will move them ever so slightly that way, or move them ever so slightly back. So let's put them back to 0, just so it's all back in the same place. So you can offset the tiles if you need to on your tile set if it's not just matching up if they've not made it properly, but this has been made pretty well because I got this from a website that free of charge. So now we've got this tile set, we should be good to go really. So we can close that now that we're happy with it. Although before we close it, actually, let me just quickly show you something. So like I mentioned previously, there are animations and brush builders that you can make in this. Now, the brush builder itself, I'm going to show you how to make that in the room, but it's the same thing here as well. So if you click on it, we can make custom brushes. And I'll show that in the room later, so we won't do that right now. Animation, though, so if we click on animation, we can make a tile that's animated, which is pretty cool. So if we click add animation and set number of frames, so we'll set number of frames to 2. And let's say put... All right, let's add some frames. So that one, and then in this one, we're going to add that one. Then when we play, you can see, look, there it's animated that tile. So this is for if you've got like, so obviously mine's like a little animation, some water. But that might be a background element or something. But basically now, when we come to put this in our level, we can have an animated tile in there, which will just animate on its own. Now, what we can do, because that's a bit fast, we could change the animation to 5 frames a second. And that looks pretty good, to be honest. But obviously, you can add more than just that. So we can add another animation, but we can do it. So we can do it for each tile, and I would suggest that because then you can dynamically make it. So set number of frames to 2 again, and we have this one in that one, and we have this one in that one, so they match up. So what should happen now is we can match this up with that, and we can use it in our tile set. So this is a pretty cool way of making animations. Now, what I'll probably suggest is you rename these So we could call it like anim underscore call it goop, because that's where it is. And then we could have the one of this one. So if we rename that one, call it anim underscore goop pipe. It's whatever you want to use. It's absolutely fine. Doesn't matter what you call it, as long as you name it something appropriate. Now, there is something called auto tiling as well. Now, I might do auto tiling in a different video when we're looking at something that's not a platformer, because this is essentially a tile set for a platformer. So if we're looking at a Zelda dungeon, I'll show you all auto tiling, but that's how you animate sprites anyway for tiles. So now we can go into rooms. So by default, and I might close some of these actually, just so they're not on screen. So where it says rooms, there'll be a thing that says room 1, but that's always there by default. Now we can use that, that's absolutely fine. So double click on it, this is your room where we can start putting the tiles in. Now if you notice, it's obviously really black and it's got nothing in it at all. Now we do need to set a height and a size for it. So by default it'll set either, you know, whatever it deems necessary, but mine's set at 1366 by 768. That's not a problem, but let's have a look, see what happens if we put our tile set in. So here at the top you'll see there's a layer for background, which is this black background. If you click on it, we can change the options, so change the color to, I don't know, say a sky blue. So let's turn this up so we can see some colors, and then we'll put it on blue, maybe a lighter blue. Yeah, about that, that's okay. So now we've got a bit of a background to work with, which looks a bit better than just black. So instances are going to be to do with objects, which we've not covered objects yet. Objects are to do with things that you can interact with within the world, but what we're going to look at first is tile sets. So on here you'll see that there's different things we can add, and what we want to add is this one. So it'll say create new tile layer. So this is going to be for our tiles that we're going to use. I'm just going to drag it below instances because it really should be underneath instances. So it should be underneath your objects, so they're at the background essentially. So now that we've got the tile editor there, or we've got a tile layer, we can rename it. And we could call this, say, background tile layer. That's fine, doesn't matter. And then when it says no tile set here, we're going to select the tile set we just made. So this one. So if you look, the grid's changed to the size of these tiles because that's how big they are. If you ever want to change the size of the grid, you click here and then you can change the grid size X and Y. Now it'll say snap as well. So if I was to select a tile, I can put this in and can place it wherever I want. And if you notice, it snaps to each square. If I go back up here and turn off snap, oops, if I can actually turn off snap, there we go. So what it should do now, let me just click off it. It's still snapping, although it shouldn't, which is a little bit annoying. But I'm hoping snap should turn it off, because it should, and it is not. Let's zoom in. So yeah, so as you can see, the tile snap on here. Now, when you place something down, if you left click and hold left click, you can obviously draw, and if you hold right click, you can delete them, which is quite easy. Now, annoyingly, turning snap off should allow you to place whatever you want, but for some reason on this it isn't, but believe me, it does. So I'm just going to turn snap back on anyway, because that's what we want to use for tiles really. If you're using tiling, it should snap, because otherwise you don't want them overlapping. I'm just going to delete some of these tiles anyway. So these tiles are a little bit too small for the play area that we've got, so I might reduce it down a tad, because at the minute this place is absolutely huge. So if we go back onto the background, not on instances, sorry, we need to go on to double click on room again. Yeah, that's it. So what you need to do is you need to go back into the assets. So as you can see on here, it'll go into something called room editor. We want to go back into assets and double click back on the room, and then we can change the size of the room. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to change this to 540, and I've already pre-calculated this before, by 270 to make it that big. Now these are 64 by 64 squares, but if we go back onto our tile layer, you'll see that they fit quite happily now, and we can put some tiles in. It doesn't look too bad. So now I can place these tiles, and it looks a little bit better because it's, you know, they'll look a bit bigger. So if we go back onto our tile layer, so if we click back on Room Editor, you'll see us tiles that we can use. Now what you can do, and I'm hoping that I can zoom in a bit better on here because it's a little bit small. In fact, I might make it larger on here so we can see. We can select more than one. So if I wanted to say that, I can select all three and it'll put all three down. And I can put them in. And obviously I can also delete each one as well if I want to. Now if you notice, there's a checkerboard in the top left corner. So by default, and a lot of editors do this in a lot of different engines, it cuts out the very first sprite in the tile set. So that's just for reference, so it knows where the tile set starts. So you might have to move, if you've got something in the top corner, you might just have to move it across on the tile set, but that's absolutely fine. That's not a problem. You can either do that in the editor or move it prior to putting it into Game Maker. But as you can see, we've got a lot of things here. Now, it is a little bit annoying to keep saying, like, so if I change and say, right, I want girders instead, select these three, put them three down, but then I want to select these three, I want to go back to them, can get a little bit annoying doing it that way. So what you can do instead is do something called brushes. So this is what I mentioned before when we were looking at it previously. So if you look at brushes, I'm going to zoom in so we can see it, and turn on editing mode down here. So make sure editing mode's on. We can select these three. So I'm going to zoom in here as well so we can see. I'm going to select these three. I'm going to click down. In fact, I'm going to select those three because these three are better. So select those three, and that's a platform. I'm also going to select these three and click in here as well. I might also select these. Oops, not all of them. Or in fact, yeah, let's do all of them. So it looks like two separate grids. Might also select this track, say, and put it somewhere else as well. Oops, it's going off screen. Might do some piping as well. So say these pipes, something like that, or these pipes. So I can literally make whatever I want. Or I could just have, you know, this sign on its own, pretty much, and just make it, put it down here. Now, once we're happy with what brushes we've got, we can turn off editing mode. Now, the cool thing with this is, I can click and be like, right, I want this one. And then just start placing these down. Or I want this one. And then start placing these down. So essentially, the brush tool allows you to make your own custom sort of tiling brushes, and then we can sort of just place them in the room quite easily. And then obviously you can just delete them just by right clicking again. Now obviously it'll always delete them by default. It'll just delete anything. So the brush tool doesn't stop you with the deleting tool, but it's quite good at putting these sort of things down. Now what you can also do is click on libraries, and you'll notice there'll be animations here, so we can put as animated tiles in as well. So obviously by default they won't look animated on here because this is while we're editing it. But if we were to press the play button, now the play button at the top is how you run the game. So if we press play, it should launch it. Now it's probably going to launch it on my other monitor, which it has done, but I'll drag it across. Now this is really small because obviously we only made it 570 by 270 or something like that, 540 by 270. So it's quite small. So if I reopen my game that's on here, you'll notice that it's very small now. It is animating. You can probably just about tell it's animating, but it is quite small. So we need to make that bigger. Now, in order to make this bigger, we need to go on something called viewports. So it'll say here, viewports and cameras. So to get on that, just in case you guys haven't got that, you need to double click on room 1 again. And it'll come up with this. So what I need to do is enable viewports and go into viewport 0. So this is essentially a camera that we use. So we want to keep the original camera. So we want to have 1366 by 768. So that should be considerably larger, hopefully. However, we need to tell it how big the room is. So the room we know is 540 by 270. Now, what this is going to do is stretch it. So instead of it being like this big, it will now stretch the game to fit the new window. So this is the size of the game, or size of the pixels that we're running. This is going to be the actual size of the window. You can just see it above my head. So if we click enable viewports, and we can have a look at visible as well. So if you click visible, it will show you what the viewport looks like. So the white sort of border that's gone around it shows you how big it's going to be, or what the camera's going to be. So if we were to change this width to say less than that. So let's put 210 in, or 221. You'll see that it's only going to look at this part. So if I press play now, it's going to stretch whatever's in there onto the screen, and it's put it on my other window. But if I drag it on, that's all it's done. So it's just dragged this little bit in. Obviously, I want to set it to the same size as the canvas, so let's do 540 and press play. I'll drag it on screen, and there you go. And as you can see, that's animating quite happily. So there's your animated sprite, and obviously you can put other sprites in as well, like we did before. So let's put some of these in. Duff, duff, duff. And press play again. And you'll see that, oh, that's not Britain. Let's try that again. Let's press play. Mine is not playing it for some reason, which is very, very strange, because usually it should. Because we've put new tiles on here, so it should hopefully show it. Now, let me just make sure that my viewports are correct. It looks like they are. So let's press stop and then press play again. That's very strange. It's not popping up for me, but it should pop up with all these sprites on screen. I've never seen it actually do this before. I have a feeling it might be because it needs to be reloaded. Let me try save the project and close it, and let's reopen it again. Because usually, so this is actually a good opportunity to talk about this. So unfortunately, like a lot of other editors and sort of, you know, if you're working with anything with graphics, computers can just crash essentially, and they don't load what should be on screen. So see, that's not saved what's on there, which it should have done, but for some reason it hasn't, and I don't know why, because you literally have just pressed save. So let's try this again. Let me just try to put some things on, and hopefully it should let me do it this time. So if I hide that layer, yeah, they're all on this layer, look. So everything on this layer should appear when we press play. So let's see if it does it this time. And yes, it has. So that was where it was. I just had to close it and reopen it. It was just being awkward for some reason. So that's essentially how you make or put tiles in and edit the room and sort of the size of the room. Obviously, if you want to make another room, you could. All you need to do is right-click on rooms and make a new room, which should be down here. So I can make a second room. Now, by default, it'll revert back to all this, but to make it easier, you could literally just say, right, I want to duplicate it. So this room will be a duplicate of this room, and as you can see, it is. So, and also, if we want to change which room opens first, so if you right-click on the room, and then go on to not create group, or is it this one? That's it. So you click on the home, and you can change which room opens first. So we can be like, right, we want this room to open first instead of this room. So we can open room 2 instead. So if we open room 2 is just black. So when we load it, there we go, it's put in room 2 instead. So that's a basic overview of like tile sets, how to animate tiles and rooms essentially, and how to put it in the room. Now, what we'll probably look at next is objects and how they sort of interact with your game. And then we might also look at things like sequences, maybe scripts. But that's essentially how you put a tile set in and edit a room in a very basic way.